Let's begin tonight with a big number, 18,332. That is the number of infections logged today, the Philippines' highest on record since the pandemic began. This pushes total caseload to almost 1.886 million, with more than 130,000 active cases. Positivity rate also remains high, with close to 25% tests coming out positive.
But that's not the only staggering figure for tonight. An additional 466 cases of the Delta variant have been detected in the country. A lion's share are local cases at 422. Total infections of the more transmissible variant are now at 1,273. The health department stopped short of officially calling the spread a community transmission. Good evening, I'm Gretchen Ho.
And I'm Robbie Alampay. You're watching The Big Story. Let's start with the DOH banking on granular lockdowns as it sees growing evidence of community transmission of the Delta variant.
The agency also projects a 66,000 active caseload by the end of the month and about 269,000 by the end of September. Greg Gregorio has the big story.
The health department has conceded that wide-scale lockdowns are no longer the best way to contain the spread of COVID-19. Health experts believe that granular lockdowns could make more difference.
Mas magiging effective at mas magiging advantageous para po sa ating lahat, magga-granular lockdowns tayo at i-improve po natin yung mga factors dun sa PDITR natin.
The agency reiterates that the public's cooperation is still key, especially amid the threat of the Delta variant. Although it is not yet official, the health department is seeing evidence of the Delta variant's community transmission in Metro Manila and Calabarzon.
Nakita natin na wala nang link ang mga kaso sa bawat isa. We are seeing clustering of cases in these two big regions.
On Monday, the Philippine Genome Center tallied 466 additional cases of the highly transmissible variant, bringing the total count of known Delta cases to 1,273. 422 of these are local cases, 14 are returning overseas Filipinos or ROFs, and 10 are still unverified. The DOH reiterates the need to ramp up COVID-19 vaccination. There is also the need to shorten the time frame from case detection to isolation. It currently takes an average of 9 days before a positive case gets isolated, while it takes 12 days in NCR. The DOH wants to trim this down to 6 days. The DOH projects active cases in NCR to hit 66,400 by end August and some 269,000 by end September if the previous 2-week ECQ period would be followed by 4 weeks of modified ECQ. For his part, Dr. Edsel Salvana of the DOH Technical Advisory Group has noted a drop in the percentage of severe and critical cases. The 2.8% cumulative percentage from August 6 has gone down to 1.8% in August 22. Salvana said this is due to the increasing number of people getting vaccinated across the country. For News 5, Greg Gregorio, we are One News.
To help us make more sense of today's alarming figures, we have with us on the line Treatment Czar and Health Undersecretary Leopoldo Vega. Yusek Vega, welcome to The Big Story.
Thank you, and thank you for having me, Robbie and Gretchen, for tonight.
Sir, 18,000 plus tayo today. What does that say about the past 2 weeks where we had a stricter lockdown?
Yeah, right. If you take a look at the whole perspective in terms of the Delta variant right now in the Philippines, we are seeing a number of new and active cases across the country. And you're seeing a rise in Region 2, in Region more specifically in Region 3, where there seems to be a real increase in terms of the number of new cases, and Region 4A, and definitely NCR, where we have a number of about 4,000 recorded for this day, with 26% comprising of the new and active cases. We will see also a steep rise in the Region 7 and Region 10. Now, this really speaks of the highly infectious Delta variant, and we're seeing that although especially in the NCR, we're seeing that since about roughly 40% of the population in the NCR has been vaccinated, we're seeing that there has been a fewer number of severe and critical cases. In fact, the total the number of severe and critical cases is down to about 1.86%. This is really compared with the last April when we have 3 to 4% of the severe and critical. So the number of cases are really increasing, but 98% of this are really in the mild, asymptomatic, and moderate category.
So some silver lining there. Are you saying, do we attribute that to vaccination efforts? Are we seeing finally some effects there?
Yeah, I think so, because we've seen this difference compared with last year, wherein we did have a number of severe and critical cases at between 3 to 4%, but we're down at 1.86%. And the only reason for this is, I guess, the vaccination, and aside from the intensified PDITR that we are doing in the local government units.
USEC, in the meantime, DOH has been emphasizing, IATF also, granular lockdown, granular lockdown. Does this mean to say we're starting to try to move away from the paradigm of always concentrating on higher numbers, ECQ, lower numbers, MECQ, and so on and so forth?
I think so. The granular lockdown, I think, is very much more effective because it is only to the barangay or to the local government unit that they can identify a barangay, a street, or a subdivision wherein there's a clustering of these new cases, especially of this Delta variant. And the only way to prevent that is if they can actually do active case tracing and make sure that these patients are isolated, traced, and tested at once in less than 48 hours. If they are able to do that, then the transmission of this virus will really go down. So I think that's one way of making sure that the transmission goes down by doing granular instead of this whole ECQ where everybody is affected. But we should focus on the clustering of cases, especially on the barangay level.
Maraming salamat po, USEC. DOH Undersecretary Leopoldo Vega. How is the capital region faring in terms of its vaccination target? Well, the Metro Manila Council believes it is on track to meet its target for herd immunity. Another big number tonight is 43%. This is the number of NCR residents that have already gotten fully vaccinated against COVID-19. This translates to more than 4 million residents. Metro Manila mayors are looking to vaccinate 9.8 million residents within NCR. This is equivalent to 70% of the 14 million plus Metro Manila population. The council is optimistic they can finish half of this target by the end of August.
These are the other big stories tonight. PhilHealth beneficiaries may have to pay medical bills up front should hospitals not back out on threats to disengage with the health insurer. They protest against PhilHealth's suspension of payments to allegedly fraudulent hospitals. The record budget for next year has finally been transmitted to Congress. The 5 trillion peso spending plan includes a 240 billion peso funding for COVID response. And has Father Time finally caught up with Manny Pacquiao after he fell short in his bout against Dennis Ugas? These big stories after the break.
Good evening. You're still watching The Big Story. I'm Bia Lampay. PhilHealth beneficiaries, listen up. You may have to pay up on your medical bills should hospitals follow through on a threat to disengage from the state insurer. Mobile journalist Jacob Lazaro gives us a front seat to this story.
Vicky Linsangan's daughter was recently confined after testing positive for COVID-19. Right now, she depends on PhilHealth benefits to lighten the burden.
Up to now, siyempre hindi pa namin alam yung running bill. Baka ma-surprise naman kami. Will it cost us like $1 million or something, or less than $1 million? Whatever amount that PhilHealth will shoulder, it's a big help.
If the row between PhilHealth and the country's hospitals isn't resolved, Vicky isn't the only one who will have a problem. All beneficiaries of PhilHealth will. The Philippine Medical Association, Philippine Hospital Association, and the Private Hospital Association threatened to disengage from PhilHealth after the state health insurer ordered the suspension of payments to hospitals under investigation for possible claim fraud. The threat pushes through. Hospitals will not renew accreditation with PhilHealth this October. That would mean PhilHealth beneficiaries will have to shell out money for their hospitalization.
Kawawa dyan, siyempre, ang ating mga pasyente. Dahil po, ang kanilang benefits, instead, i-deduct kaagad ng mga ospital. Ang mangyayari po, i-advance muna ng pasyente at i-refund na lang nila sa PhilHealth.
There are 96 billion PhilHealth beneficiaries as of December 2020. And with the current surge of COVID cases, these beneficiaries would have to stand on their own if the process breaks down. Hospital fees and other medicines, medical bills of severe to critical cases can easily reach 1 million pesos or more. Degrano says the hospitals are groaning under the weight of the pandemic, with PhilHealth not having paid some 73 billion pesos in unreleased claims to the hospitals.
Po nalulugi ngayon ng ospital dahil malaking bahagi po ng income nila andun sa PhilHealth. Benefits po yun ng mga miyembro na hinohold nila, na hindi nila binabalik sa amin.
Lawmakers and the health department scheduled a dialogue between the two parties in the House of Representatives on Tuesday. So Filipinos like Linsangan don't have to pay the consequences of this conflict. I'm Jacob Lazaro and we are One News.
Time for our next quick look at some of the day's big stories. Hong Kong is finally allowing entry to fully vaccinated OFWs starting August 30. After rejecting vaccine proofs from LGUs, the city-state will now accept vaccine certificates from the Bureau of Quarantine. OFWs will still have to isolate in hotels, care of their employers. The proposed 2022 budget of 5 trillion pesos has been transmitted to Congress. That is the country's highest budget to date and 11.5% higher than 2021's 4.5 trillion pesos. 4% of the budget, or 240 billion pesos, has been set aside for the pandemic response. Congress will now deliberate on each agency's proposed spending plan. And the Food and Drugs Administration has granted Russia's Sputnik Light COVID vaccine an emergency use authorization. Sputnik Light is a single-dose variation of the two-dose Sputnik V. Sputnik Light has a 79.4% efficacy and can be refrigerated in a typical 2 to 8 degree Celsius storage.
An orphanage in Cebu City is under lockdown due to a COVID-19 outbreak among teenagers. Similar scenario is being reported in a homeless shelter in Manila, where at least half of those infected are children. Jenny Dongon with the details.
This facility for the abandoned boys in Barangay Talamban, Cebu City has been placed under lockdown. 27 teenage boys tested positive for COVID-19 after one of the caregivers got infected. Based on the finding of the Health Emergency Response Team, the outbreak may have started during the center's family event, which employees also attended.
1 week after, may may inuubo, may sinisipon, may lagnat. Yun tapos, yung first, nagpaswab sila, nag-positive. So, ang lahat.
Though the teens are not allowed to leave the compound, caregivers are not stay-in employees.
Yung foster parent nila, sila ang magbibili ng mga food nila, magpapalengke, grocery, yun. Kasi may talaga, yung nag-first positive, ang nanay talaga yung foster parent nila, yung nag-aalaga sa mga bata.
Another building within the same center is also locked down. Aside from 7 foster parents, a 4-year-old orphan was also infected. They are all asymptomatic. For the health department, the situation has not improved in Central Visayas as well as Northern Mindanao despite the ECQ. Back in Manila, more children are getting infected with COVID-19. For instance, almost half of around 100 COVID cases in homeless shelter Hospicio de San Jose are children. Something that baffles the management considering that they have been on lockdown since last year.
During the first week of July and towards the end of June, mayroon mga employees and some of the children that they have to go to the doctor. Some of them turned positive, so I don't know. I don't know kung sila ang nakadala ng virus paloob pagkagaling na sa doctors nila.
3 of the COVID-19 patients have been brought to the hospital while majority are already recovering at the shelter.
We are helping them right now, trying to find facilities also kung kailangan po namin i-extract ang iba para po hindi magtuloy-tuloy ang infection.
Hospicio de San Jose is currently calling for donations like food and vitamins. For those who wish to donate, you may reach the number and email flashed on your screens. For News 5, Jenny Dongon, we are One News.
For the big story in sports, Filipino boxer Mark Magnifico Magsayo is a step closer to a world title after a stunning victory over Mexico's Julio Ceja in their featherweight showdown. In the 10th round, Magsayo landed 2 perfect right overhands on the jaw of Ceja, rendering the Mexican unconscious. Magsayo improved to 23-0 in his professional career with 16 victories coming by knockout. More importantly, Magsayo became the #1 contender for the WBC Featherweight Championship.
Pasalamat ako na ang dream ko na talaga makada-undercard kasi Senator Manny Pacquiao natupad na at nanalo pa ako. Itong pinakalaban na to, pinaka-importante talaga sa akin to kasi pag nanalo ako dito, world title shot ng susunod.
Meanwhile, in local hoops, the Pampanga provincial government has formally approved the resumption of the PBA Philippine Cup as early as next week. PBA Commissioner Willie Marshall said the league was given the go signal by Pampanga Governor Dennis Pineda, but gave no definite timetable as to when the conference will resume. The approval comes as teams arrived in different hotels within Pampanga where they are expected to stay until the end of their campaigns. The games will likely be held at the campus of Don Honorio Ventura State University in Bacolor. Time for another quick break. When we return, U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris visits Southeast Asia, but the Philippines is not on the itinerary. Should this be a cause for concern? And should boxing champ Manny Pacquiao refuse to throw in the towel? Who could he be facing next? Find out after the break.
Good evening, you're still watching Big Story. I'm Robbie Alampay. U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris is visiting Singapore and Vietnam, hoping to seal ties made after Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin's trip last July, with the Philippines excluded from the itinerary should there be cause for concern. Mobile journalist Stanley Cajete gets insights from an expert in this report.
U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris is visiting Southeast Asia this week, holding talks with leaders from Singapore and Vietnam, focusing on cooperation in defeating coronavirus, U.S. business and security interests in the region. In her first visit to Asia, the U.S. Vice President hopes to strengthen U.S. ties, damaged by former President Trump, as well as counter China's creeping influence in the region. But is she skipping the Philippines, U.S. oldest ally in the Asia-Pacific region? For Dindo Manhit, founder and managing director of the Strat-based group, it was not a snub.
I think it's part of the strategy really of the Biden administration to show how important the whole region is. So I don't see any malice on that.
On Monday, Harris witnessed the signing of Memorandum of Agreement, including one on cyber defense cooperation, after she met Prime Minister Lee Hsien-loong in a visit to a naval base where U.S. Navy vessels have access. She is due to Hanoi tomorrow and will talk with Southeast Asian health ministers as the U.S. will launch a regional center for disease control in Vietnam.
Singapore has always been a partner militarily also by the U.S. I think very critical is yung importance ng Vietnam. This is a neighbor of China and actually aggressively fighting China.
Vice President Harris' quick swing in Southeast Asia is part of the Biden's administration's 1-2 counterpunch against China. First, he sent Austin to step up defense and military relations. This week, Harris is focusing on Singapore as the region's financial hub and Vietnam as vital supply chain for the U.S. economy.
This is very important when you look at the Vice President, the second highest official of the United States, visiting at this time, because I think they see our region as key to the recovery of the world.
I am Stanley Gete and we are One News.
Another big story in sports. Time and time again, Manny Pacquiao has shown that age is just a number inside the ring. But his recent loss against Dennis Ugas might not be the case anymore. Lynn Olivario has the big story.
Has Father Time finally caught up with Manny Pacquiao? During his fight against Dennis Ugas, boxing analyst Ron De Los Reyes can't help but notice Pac-Man's footwork, movement and punches were no longer the same. Be it the 2-year inactivity or his 42-year-old body, for De Los Reyes, the wear and tear is evident.
He could not really go around the ring, no? Na tulad nung ginagawa niya noon. And he could not release his punches the way he did when he was younger.
But for boxing analyst Nisi Icasiano, age wasn't the issue. It was more of Ugas' boxing style.
He compelled Manny Pacquiao to fight in his own pace, using a simple strategy, keeping his jabs busy, targeting the body with a right straight.
But there were still areas of concern for Icasiano. Pacquiao was not bouncing in and out and was quite flat-footed. Average punches landed was also low. And so, the question now stands. Should this be Pac-Man's last fight?
It shows na syempre there's age na, may age factor na rin kahit papaano. Pero hindi siya yung tipo na fight na masasabi mo. That's it for Manny Pacquiao. And I don't see him walking away from the sport just like that.
Sabi nila, baka nga ito yung huling laban ni Manny, but he's exiting with a loss, no? But nothing to be ashamed of dahil talaga namang ginawa ni Manny yung kanyang makakaya.
Without a title right now, a fight against Terence Crawford or Errol Spence Jr. seems bleak. Icasiano says Pac-Man could still face the likes of Robert Guerrero or Abel Ramos. But for De Los Reyes, Manny should not wait for another fighter to send him to retirement.
Malakas pa rin siya, no? But against the younger boxers, mahirapan na. Saka ayaw natin makita na medyo matatalo ng ganon-ganon lang si Manny.
Despite contrasting beliefs on whether Pacquiao will retire, the two agreed that the fight was judged well. And with the win, they feel that Ugas established himself as one of the elite fighters in the welterweight division. For News 5, Lynn Olivario, we are One News.
In Samar, a 65-year-old blind woman has gone viral as she got her eyesight back after 3 years.
Makikita niyo na ako? Opo. Ilang po ito, Nay?
Dalawa.
Nababasa niyo na ito? Wow.
Teresita Beliver lost her vision in 2018 due to cataract. Noel Husay Laksamana of the International Eye Center restored her eyesight. Teresita could not help but shed tears upon seeing the world again. Dr. Noel said Teresita saved up money for the operation herself. He gave Teresita 3 rules for her newfound sight.
Bawal magkukusot na mata. Ha? Number 1. Number 2, bawal titingin sa pangit. Titingnan niyo yung blessing.
Kabisado ko na po yun.
Number 3, bawal gagawa ng kasalanan.
Ganda
Much
naman.
welcome, good news, partner.
And welcome back. Welcome back, Gretch. Ha? It's been 2 weeks, but I hope it's not too late to say congratulations to you and everybody who covered the Olympics for Team Philippines.
Maraming salamat, Robbie. Nakakamiss ka. Na-miss ka namin.
Yeah.
Siyempre, gusto ko na i-congratulate yung mga kasama ko, sila Paulo Del Rosario, na bumalik na rin sa the game tonight. And I think, the festivities are not over for us yet. I'm wearing gold, as you can see.
Yung pala yun. Gold pala yun. Sige.
Nakuha mo ba yung pasalubong ko?
Yeah, nawawala yung chocolates eh. Ewan ko, may nawawala eh. But welcome back, Gretch.
Maraming salamat. And tomorrow, I'll tell you all about the place where I'm in and give you, some stories behind the scenes here. But for now, that wraps up today's big story. Catch us again tomorrow at 8 p.m. on Signal Channels 8 and 250. It is nice to be back.
It's nice to have you back. Please like our Facebook page, One News. For more in-depth analysis, visit our webpage, onenews.ph. Mask on.
Wash hands!
And stay safe, Philippines. Ako po si Robbie Alampay.